Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Inside Queen Goo. My name is Dylan, the head writer of Queen Goo and the host of this podcast. For those of you that just wandered into this podcast and have no clue what we are doing here, allow me to enlighten you. Queen Goo is a series that I created nearly 17 years ago. Despite a few breaks here and there, has managed to survive all of that time. The reason for this podcast is because I would like to give you a walk through the history of Queen Goo, from its origins to the state it is in today. The good, the bad, and the unthinkable. So if you are a fan of Queen Goo, or you want some insight into what goes into creating a drama series, this is the podcast for you. If neither of those categories include you, maybe you can stick around and use this podcast as a lullaby. Anyways, let's get started. Believe it or not, Queen Goo was actually born from a game I had played with my dog Damien when I was only 7 years old. At the time, the series was known as King Beast, and the only two characters were Dylan Dog, who was a character based on me, and King Damien Beast, who is obviously a character based on my dog of the same name. When the series began, King Beast was a tyrant who ruled over the city of Fantastic City, and Dylan Dog was a hero that had come in to stop him. Eventually, King Beast was defeated and decided to turn over a new leaf, becoming friends with Dylan Dog. It was after this that the series truly began. Shortly after the battle between Dylan Dog and King Beast, multiple other characters were introduced to the series. There was King Beast's assistant and love interest, Mrs. Molly Goo, her daughter Katie Dog, as well as the vast cast of villains, including Wishbone and his cohort Sonia, the Master and his sidekick/girlfriend April, the Master's malevolent father, the Evil Force, and the main antagonists of the show, the Cats, which at the time consisted of Katie Cat, who is Katie Dog's cat counterpart, Dylan Cat, who is Dylan Dog's cat counterpart, Kitty Cat, and Kitty Cat's dumb sidekick, Meow Cat. The first year of the show focused on Dylan Dog fighting these villainous characters, with the support of King Beast, Mrs. Goo, and Katie Dog. But the series underwent some big changes in 2005. Not only were the characters of April, Sonia, and Wishbone phased out, but the character of King Beast was killed off. With King Beast dead, Fantastic City was left without a leader. Fortunately, Mrs. Goo was ready to step up to the plate. This was when the series began going by the title it uses today, Queen Goo. 2006 was another big year for the series, because it saw the introductions of the characters that would lead the show for years to come. Dylan Dog finally qualified as a superhero when he got his own sidekick. Andy Dog, a new detective at the Fantastic PD, began fighting alongside Dylan Dog. The year also saw the introductions of Josephine Cat, a friend of Andy Dog's. At first, Dylan Dog didn't trust her because she carried the cat name, but eventually Josephine Cat proved to be a formidable ally. Also introduced this year was Mrs. Tasha Bebeda, Queen Goo's assistant. Despite not being out of commission, Queen Goo and Mrs. Bebeda actually took turns as queens of Fantastic City for the next few years, and the series was named after whoever was queen at the time. Despite this, Queen Goo's name ended up being the most recognizable title, which is why it is the one the series has kept to this day. Another forgettable fact is that around this time frame, my cousin Vic actually ran a Queen Goo spin-off, which centered on the lives of the cats, giving a point of view to Fantastic City's biggest rivals. The Cat's focus continued to grow when the origins of the dog and cat feud was finally delved into. The feud began because of a romance that went bad between Scott Dog and Velma Cat several years prior to the beginning of the series. Ever since then, the dogs and cats had been at each other's throats. It was also revealed that Dylan Dog and Andy Dog were the love children of Scott and Velma, technically making them both dog and cat. Around the same time, the villain known up to that point as Dylan Cat was revealed to be an imposter. The real Dylan Cat was actually a good man who opposed the cat's hatred for the dogs. As a result, the cats imprisoned him and gave plastic surgery to a man named Joe Fish so that he could look just like Dylan Cat and would easily be able to take Dylan Cat's place. My cousin Vix came up with Joe's name, by the way, so don't blame me. The character of Joe didn't last much longer after this. He finally snapped, he turned on the cats, and met with an apparent demise when he fell off of a cliff after a fight with Dylan Dog, though his body was never recovered, of course. After Joe's death was around the time Queen Goo began to take a bit of a different direction. Dylan Dog lost the powers he had before, and around that time, the character of Andre Stampatos was introduced. It was Andre's hatred for Dylan Dog that positioned him as the new main antagonist of the show for years to come. Queen Goo also had a few specials during this time period that brought the characters to both the Arctic and to Egypt. Come 2011, Queen Goo really began to embrace the new direction it had been going in. For the first time ever, the Queen Goo series debuted online. The online debut also brought about some serious changes, like all of the dog characters dropping dog from their name and being given last names. Along with those changes, it was revealed that Dylan and Andy were not the children of Scott and Velma after all. In fact, Dylan and his sworn nemesis Andre were in fact brothers. The 2011 online version of Queen Goo was short-lived, and the series went back to being live. That same year, the character of Dylan Cat was killed by Andre, who mistook him for Dylan. In 2012, the character of King Beast was discovered to be alive after being presumed dead for 7 years, and he and Queen Goo reunited. That same year, Queen Goo's family expanded even more when Andy was revealed to be her son and her nephew VJ arrived in town. In 2013, Queen Goo finally stopped having live episodes and transitioned into a comic series, which allowed me to introduce more characters. That year saw the introduction of VJ's brother Brady, VJ's father Victor, along with Dylan and Andre's brother Franco, and Dongle Cat's never before heard of son Liam Murphy, aka Lucky Cat. That year also marked the debut of the iconic Fantastic City location, Club Aqua. Despite 2013 being the year Queen Goo transitioned to a comic, 2014 was when Queen Goo's evolution really took place. 2014 introduced many of Queen Goo's most iconic characters, such as Rebecca Rogers, Sierra Goo, Claudia Stampatos, Lawrence Stampatos, Lucas Cambino, Lydia Masters, Madeline Masters, Serena Masters, Ilya Andropov, Christina Cat, Olivia Serbi, and even Queen Goo. That year also saw the return of some characters that hadn't been seen in quite some time, such as Katie Goo, Josephina Serbi, Wishbone, the Master's sidekick April, Andy Cat, and King Beast when it was revealed that the King Beast who had returned 2 years prior was an imposter, all of which was to celebrate the series' 10th anniversary. Out of those characters, the character of Katie was the one who benefited the most, as she saw the most amount of airtime she had gotten in years when she was paired with the newly popular Lucas. Unfortunately, the pairing of Lucas and Katie was poorly received. Queen Goo did see the rise of some popular pairings, however, with Andy and Rebecca and Dylan and Lydia. In late 2014, Queen Goo transitioned from comics to being written on paper. This lasted until mid-2015 when the series permanently transitioned to being an online series, releasing episodes 5 days a week. 2015 was a memorable year for more than just that reason. In late 2015, a serial killer began to wreak havoc on Fantastic City, their first victim being Lucas. Following Lucas's death, a new character was killed off every Friday, leaving viewers wondering each week who would meet their maker next. At the end of the storyline, it was revealed that Queen Goo was the murderer. She had suffered a mental break and believed she was her mother, who was also a serial killer. It was revealed that the cause of Queen Goo's mental break was when she saw her mother murder her father when she was much younger. Queen Goo ended up pushing her mother down a flight of stairs, killing her. Queen Goo was devastated over her actions, but fortunately, it was revealed that none of her victims were actually dead. All of their deaths had been faked by Andre, and he was holding them all prisoner, something I wrote because I realized I had made a mistake in killing quite a few of those characters. Despite not being responsible for the deaths, Queen Goo still went for medical treatment due to her breakdown, and was able to come back from it. That same year, Dylan was diagnosed with a terminal illness and died in Lydia's arms on Christmas Day. With Dylan dead, I began pushing Lydia towards Lucas, and the first half of 2016 was spent on building towards their romance. 2016 was a strange year for Queen Goo. Despite having many ups, the year had plenty of downs as well. It saw the return of Andy's old nemesis, Jack Fulton, who had plastic surgery so no one in Fantastic would recognize him. However, none of the storylines Jack was involved in really took off, and the character was killed off only a year later. This year also saw the introduction of Lucas's brother Corey, who had an affair with Lucas's wife Adelina years earlier. Corey was brought on as a love interest for Katie, but the character and pairing never took off. His feud with Lucas never went anywhere, and in order to get rid of the character, a new serial killer storyline was written which ended with Corey being the murderer and meeting his maker after a showdown with Rebecca. That year also saw an attempted resurrection of the cats. Dylan Cat returned after being presumed dead for 5 years. It was revealed that Kitty Cat had impregnated Serena with Dylan Cat's and Serena's child, without either of their consent. When Dylan Cat was brought back, I had intended to write him as a gray character, bordering on good and bad, but the character went too far towards bad when it was revealed he had recruited Mark Raymond to kill Christina. The character was eventually killed off for the final time when he was running from the police. VJ cornered Dylan Cat on the roof of an apartment building. In order to avoid being arrested, Dylan Cat jumped off the building to his death. Kitty Cat and Katie Cat returned that same year, though Kitty Cat ended up being one of Corey's victims. Katie Cat lasted a little longer as she forged an alliance with Andre to oust Andre's old brother Alexios from Stampatos Enterprises so they could take his place as the CEOs. Despite having returned with a husband, Fletcher Michaels, and having a romance teased with Andre, Katie Cat was killed off only a year after returning. Though unlike Kitty Cat's body was never found. 2016 was also the year when a new head writer was introduced. For about a month, both myself and my friend Andy wrote Queen Goo, and quite a bit happened during that short-lived partnership. For starters, the character of Queen Goo was diagnosed with a heart disease and ended up passing away. Around the same time, one of Queen Goo's most iconic episodes took place when Brady and Christina were on their honeymoon, and Christina found herself cornered by Mark, who had terrorized her months earlier. This episode ended with a shocker when Christina, in a fit of rage, tackled Mark off of a cliff, causing both of them to be impaled by a rock. This is something I can credit Andy with. He is the one who came up with the idea of Christina tackling Mark off of the cliff, and them both being impaled by a rock. Killing Mark at the end of the story was always the plan. But I wanted to do it in a way where Mark's body was never found so I could leave the door open for a return down the line. However, I remember Andy insisting that this death for Mark be permanent, which is why Mark's body was recovered after his death. So far, Mark's death has yet to be reversed, so it appears Andy got his way. Also that year, Queen Goo held a character contest where fans could come up with a character concept with the possibility that the character could end up on Queen Goo. Andy submitted a character named Bethany Wilson, who's described as being smug and the long-lost paternal half-sister Peter Wilson. And 5 years later, the character Bethany is still driving story. After the so-and-so year that was 2016, Queen Goo had an excellent year in 2017. To celebrate the 500th online episode of Queen Goo, the series did an arc that featured the return of Joe Fish, who had been killed off 10 years earlier. The storyline started in the 450th episode, but really picked up in the 500th episode when Joe hijacked everyone's TV and revealed that he had poisoned the air in Fantastic City. This storyline ended up being my personal favorite Queen Goo story of all time. The story saw the deaths of multiple characters, including Christina, whose death scene is most definitely my favorite scene out of anything I've ever written, and easily the most heart-wrenching. Joe's reign of terror in Fantastic lasted for nearly 2 months, but ended when he kidnapped Rebecca so he could lure Andy and Lysandros Masters to a warehouse with the intention of killing them. When Andy and Lysandros arrived, they found Rebecca hanging over a pool of acid. Lysandros rescued Rebecca, while Andy and Joe had a final showdown. Joe ended up falling off the catwalk, but managed to grab onto the edge, dangling over the acid. After remembering all the pain and suffering Joe had caused over the past several months, Andy made the fatal decision of dropping Joe into the acid, with the sadistic villain met with a gruesome end. After the conclusion of Joe's reign of terror, Queen Goo would only remain on the air for a few more months. However, the storylines that were picked up prior to the series' end were nothing short of thrilling. For starters, both Dylan and Christina were revealed to be alive and being held prisoner at a medical facility in Boston. Brady, who had been struggling with alcoholism due to Christina's death, checked into this facility and came so close to seeing his dead wife, but just narrowly missed her. Meanwhile, VJ was shot and killed on the day he was supposed to finally marry Serena. This led to Victor lashing out at everyone and being thrown out of his own son's funeral due to his horrendous behavior. Serena ended up growing closer to Alexios during this time, and when Serena left Fantastic to get away from the stress, she ended up on the same flight as Alexios, who was looking into a mystery. Serena teamed up with Alexios to help him. And at the same time, Bethany was back in Fantastic, feeling insecure over Alexios and Serena's growing closeness. In a moment of weakness, Bethany had a one-night stand with someone who she used to be engaged to, who also happened to be a woman. The storyline was meant to have huge ramifications, with Bethany's secret planned to be revealed at her wedding to Alexios. But unfortunately, Queen Goo stopped airing new episodes in December 2017, due to releasing 5 episodes a week becoming too much trouble for me. After Queen Goo ended, I had planned to bring it back numerous times, with a smaller cast and the idea that it would only air 1 episode a week. A return nearly happened in 2018, but plans fell through last minute and it didn't happen. Finally, in 2019, a new concept for a return had been developed. Queen Goo returned, and it was revealed that a lot had happened in between the last episode and the newest series. Rebecca murdered Andre after he caused an accident that put her and Andy's daughter in a coma. She was then committed and asked for a divorce from Andy so he wouldn't have to wait for her to be released. While Rebecca was in the asylum, Victor fixed up Andy with his prodigy, Daisy Nichols, an aspiring lawyer with some deep-rooted insecurity issues, who also happened to be the evil force's daughter and the Master's little sister. At the same time, Bethany had taken control of Stampato's enterprises and broken up with Alexios after learning he had cheated on her, and an amnesiac Dylan returned to Fantastic and reunited with Lydia. A distraught Lucas ended up developing feelings for Bethany, and the two became a couple. The new Queen Goo series was met with praise by the audience, mainly due to the antics of Daisy, who proved to be a unique villain. Despite being on a planned hiatus, the new Queen Goo series is still going strong, with no signs of slowing down, with some exciting storylines and stunning plot twists on the horizon. With the current casts and characters in Queen Goo, I can confidently say that Queen Goo is in the best place it has ever been in, and I look forward to seeing what the future holds. Thank you for listening to Inside Queen Goo. This has been Dylan, and I look forward to seeing you again.